Well, good morning, Commissioner, and Happy New Year to you and your office. We welcome you back to the Environment Select Committee this morning to give us some evidence and your thoughts on your report in relation to the Estimate of Environmental Expenditure. So we will hand it over to you. You have 30 minutes with us this morning. So members, I'm sure will have plenty of questions. So we'll hand it over to you for your opening remarks.
Very good. I'll be as brief as I can, so you can ask some questions, and Happy New Year to you. Seeming old to me already, but still. Look, I'll take you through this. I've got a few words to say about geology nature, a few words to say about work we've done on regional councils. Just a couple of caveats right up front. This series only goes back to 2022-23, so it's still young, and I would caution against making too many comparisons over trends over time yet. There have been improvements in the way we've collected the data, and there has also been some changes to methodology. Second thing is that I should just note that up until this year, 25-26, MFE's numbers were completely opaque. And so it was really quite difficult to interpret. There's been a big improvement in this year. Peter can talk to you about that if you're interested. But this is a new system which I've done without the assistance of the Treasury or anyone else, which is a pity. Like it, but still it's developing, and we've had to do a lot of work to set it up in a way so that you have over time a respectable database that you can work across years from if you wish to. With that said, the clear trend in 25-26 overall for environmental expenditure under the categorisation we produce is a clear decrease at 2.565 billion. It's the lowest since our first estimate. So now this part of public expenditure accounts for 1.4% of total budgeted expenditure compared to 2%. The decrease is largely a result of the tapering off of funding associated with the recovery from the North Island weather events of a little while back. For reasons which are absolutely clear to this committee, this one is likely to continue to bounce around. So I think you need to put that to one side. Looking at longer term trends, there has been a very significant decrease with respect to climate mitigation expenditure, which peaked at 840 million in 23-24. It's fallen to 444 million in this current year. Now, look, to be frank with you, the gross numbers are not particularly interesting, and I haven't produced them for the purpose of making claims about whether the aggregate amount went up or down. That's not the point of the exercise. They've been produced to help this committee and this office to dig deeper and understand how across government we are contributing to achieving all the environmental outcomes, and whether we are making a difference and whether we could be spending the money better or whether we've got the balance right. And to ask that, you have to ask questions that dig deeper. I'm saying you, the committee. I'm doing the same. My dig for this year is focused on spending on environmental research and how that may be affected by current reforms of the public science system. That's not easy. You go to MB, you ask where the money's going, and you'll see in our report, we've got our famous Sankey diagram, and there's money from MB running to the various outcomes. But look, it's actually extremely hard to track that. The money is always behind. It's not necessarily allocated in a way which we can easily see. What I want to do is to understand, okay, where were we putting our environmental research investment before these reforms? Where will we be afterwards? Did some areas win? Did some areas lose? What's the aggregate? But you have to ask a lot of questions, and I would encourage you to use this sort of information to do the same. I think you need to identify areas that you'd like to dig into, starting from these numbers. We went to great trouble to have them in your hands 2 weeks before scrutiny week, and as far as I'm aware, they weren't used. So I would urge you to use them for the purpose for which they're intended. Focus on a particular area. You can't focus on all of this. You can't focus on 2.65 billion. It's really, it's a tool which gives you the totality and then enables you to say, we want to zero in on an area. We want to ask some questions across all of government in that area. And look, there's plenty to focus on. I mean, for instance, if you look at the environmental institutions line, and by the way, when I say look at that, what we're looking at is this table here, okay?
Yeah.
Look at the environmental institutions line. If you want to understand the decline in 23-24 and to 24-25, why did that happen? Well, it's attributable to lots of things. I mean, there were cuts at DOC in terms of biodiversity, MPI spending less on agricultural policy initiatives. I mean, it comes down to quite small things like the Sustainable Farming Fund got halved or whatever. And then it pops up again in 24-25. Why? Well, the reason seems to be that MFE was boosting its spending around the RMA reform. So suddenly there's a big chunk of money going there. Spending by other agencies stays largely static across the period. Now, obviously, that money being spent around RMA reform isn't going to go on forever. That's a short-term thing.
I'm just trying.
It
is on page 5 you're talking about. Or
yes, it is. And
the breakdown.
And the title is Improving the Efficiency and Effectiveness of Institutions Designed to Manage Human Interventions in the Environment.
The table on that page.
Oh, yeah.
Table 1?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just giving you an example. You see it, there's a big drop there and no explanation. We've got some information below that, but not a great deal. But as a committee, you have the authority to require people to come in and tell you what's going on. So you can go below those numbers. As I've said to you, I'm doing that on research. So could I encourage you to use this? I didn't just do it for the select committee. I've done it for my own purposes. I don't see you can be commissioner for the environment and not know where all of this money is being spent and on what. So we're trying to get some transparency around this. And it may lead you to conclusions that you didn't think you'd come to. You might think that actually we're probably spending enough there, but we're not spending enough there. Or we're supposed to be spending a lot, but what are the results? These are the sorts of questions which this was done to assist you with. So I won't go on about that. The numbers are the numbers. You'll have noted in this report, we did a little focus area on jobs for nature because that was coming to an end. We tried to attribute the money to the 3 big environmental outcomes to the classification we're using, and they basically get spent in 3 large areas: biodiversity, freshwater, pest control. And what did we learn? And you'll see we've got some comments there on page 13 relating to our work. And I think dig into this really confirmed the whole purpose for doing this sort of exercise. The first is that environmental challenges cut across the responsibilities of many agencies. The appropriations-based system, whereby you hold governments to account on the appropriations, doesn't work easily when you've got things which can go across agencies. So that poses a challenge for tracking expenditure and impact. And the Auditor General's had some things to say about this, and I think this approach could be useful in trying to get better transparency. The second thing we've consistently called for is stronger public accountability and reporting on environmental objectives. Governments need to be a whole lot clearer about what they're trying to achieve. Thirdly, we need to report on the impact of any investment, not just outputs, but outcomes. I mean, you could say, oh, well, Jobs for Nature was about jobs. And yeah, we counted up the jobs and we got X jobs. Well, if that's why you did it, fine. If you claimed you were doing it, which was the claim at the time, no, for helping the environment, okay, what is it you were trying to achieve? Did you achieve it? I mean, and it's not, again, can I say, it's not a question of gotcha type stuff. Often when you start expenditure in these areas, you don't know whether they're going to be successful and you learn from failures. I think this is really, really important. So no one should be embarrassed about expenditure which may have missed the target. You just don't want to go on spending it in the same way in the next year. So we want to learn from what we're doing. Another difficulty is that, environmental issues take time to resolve. And you've got lots of communities working hard, things like catchment groups and so on. But their progress is hindered by the fact you get this on again, off again funding. There's a little scheme here this year, then there's another one next year, and then it's gone, and then there's a new one. You know, this is a real problem for a lot of community-based people who I think more and more, I think we really need to rely on. Now, look, there's presently, this is the big, I think, conclusion you have to draw about something like Jobs for Nature. There's no guarantee that the undoubted progress that was made under some headings will be sustained. As I say in the report, wallabies, wilding pines and water quality did not appear as problems because of COVID-19. And the end of the Jobs for Nature program is likely to see pressures that were temporarily suppressed re-emerge. And you really have to think about that as well, because if you just throw money at something for a short period and then take it away, you've effectively wasted taxpayers' money. If things are re-invading, whether it's wallabies or possums or whatever, so maybe it's better to have maybe spend less, but have a sustained longer term approach. Again, these are all questions I think a select committee should be able to follow up on in much greater detail than I can. It was also clear to us that there wasn't any rigorous prioritisation exercise used to identify which bits of the environment you would go after. So if you haven't read that little section of it, do, with the sort of resources I've got and the time, and we're rushing to get this to you in scrutiny week, that's about the best that I can do. But it's the sort of thing which if you decide as a committee this year, let's focus on a thing and get the agencies in that you can do. So that's Jobs for Nature. Quick word on regional councils. This expenditure, of course, is expenditure by central government, but regional councils are a hugely important part. I mean, they really are the front line of environmental management for much of New Zealand, and they spend quite a lot of money too. So we thought, well, it would be interesting for you and for us to understand what the nature of that spend is. And we did a pilot, which, you've go with cap in hand, they don't have to help us, but they try where they can. And so Hawke's Bay, Waikato, Taranaki and Marlborough, which is a unitary, agreed to help, and we're very grateful to them for the help they gave us. And we wanted to know whether we could go inside regional councils and categorise their expenditure using the classification that we've developed here. The exercise proved that it was technically feasible to do that, although it would probably require a few adjustments, and Peter can tell you more about that if you're interested, because regional councils aren't exactly accounting for things the way government does. We think to make it work, you'd have to have a champion in each regional council who's prepared to assist, because this is not their day job trying to help the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. So you've really got to get somebody, and those councils did indeed find us somebody who we could work with. We're very grateful to them. But what we've run up against is this. We've now got massive institutional reform being proposed at the regional level. So we're going to pause everything. There's just, I mean, A, they're distracted. B, we don't know what's going to be there at the regional level a year from now. So we're going to pull back at this point. But just to give you an idea of what's at stake, total environmental spending from just 2 councils, representing 4% of New Zealand's population, was over $60 million. It'd be good to know, wouldn't it, how that 60 million fits into and backs up or doesn't what central government is spending in those regions. This is we really need to understand the total picture. So we'll come back to that once the reforms have been completed. Finally, just a quick note to say that we're still improving this estimate over time, and we came across a big hole this year. We undercounted biosecurity-related expenditure by $30 million. And guess where the gap was? It was LINZ. LINZ actually spends quite a lot of money when you consider it. So it's a land manager, yeah. $30 million, which they hadn't classified for us. And so anyhow, we've got that into the tent now. But just to make the point, we're still uncovering expenditure, quite important lumps, so 30 million is not nothing, which is contributing to the environmental outcomes that you're all trying to achieve. But we actually wasn't even on our radar screen. It wasn't on their radar screen. So am I correct that they notified us?
That's
Yeah. So anyhow, I'll leave it there, but I'm very hopeful the committee will, and you're very welcome to come and talk to us about this. If you want to embark on something, we can probably advise what might be easy, what might be harder. But this is something that I use for my analysis, but I think you could use it as well. So.
Well, thank you very much for that insight. Look, we will hand over to questions. We'll go to Priyanka first.
Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for your work on this. It's and your team. It's been really insightful, actually. And I think it kind of goes to a different way of looking at spend,
Yes,
which
it
is
does.
what you're saying here. And so that's made me think, if we were looking at it in a sense, sort of back to front. So rather than looking at what percentage of GDP is being spent on environmental outcomes and
With the
just
GDP, it was government expenditure.
government expenditure is being spent on environmental outcomes. If we look at it from the other end of the outcomes themselves and what we want to achieve, and then work backwards
That's right.
from there, I would think that for governments to do it that way, I mean, it makes sense to me. It makes sense in the way that you've laid it out. Successive governments have tried to do things differently. Some of us have been part of the domestic and sexual violence projects that look at bringing different agencies together towards specific outcomes. It's not easy, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
What do governments need to be aware of in terms of what you've experienced and learned through this process to be able to front end that way of thinking?
Well, I mean, you have to do both. I mean, you on behalf of taxpayers are appropriating money and you have to be able to account for it. And that's what the Auditor General checks.
Yeah.
And you have oversight of. So you have to do that end of the telescope.
Yeah.
But the outcomes end, absolutely. That's where we need to do much more work. And if you want that to be an easier to do exercise, it really comes down to the Finance and Expenditure Committee, I suppose. Although I've just gone off and done this, and I've reported this to them, by the way, and I've talked to them about this. But if you want to do this, you really need, it's all boring, tedious stuff. You need to develop standardized methodologies for doing things. And as I say in the report, a standardized mechanism for tagging departmental expenditure against defined environmental activities would allow for clearer, more comparable reporting between government departments. And I don't think this is so difficult. It's like barcoding things. Now, the departments are set up with charts of accounts, which are all different and operate in different ways for good reason. I'm not suggesting you try and get in there. We've got to work with government. Well, we are working with government departments each year, going back to the same people. Hopefully, hasn't been a revolving door. They know what we're talking about. Yes, we know what you're coming for. Yes, we can do that exercise for you. Now, it could be made easier. I've asked two ministers of finance if they would help. So far, I haven't been lucky. And you might think about other areas of government expenditure. I think this one lends itself to it because the outcomes are so diffuse. They're so all-encompassing of the nation, you know, our biodiversity, our biosecurity, our water quality. And there's so many agencies involved. Unless you can put the big picture together, you really don't get, you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah.
So, but it comes down to, it's just hard work. I mean, Peter here is a person who comes from a statistical background, understands public accounts and understands statistics. He has spent the last 4 years putting this together.
But a really key part is to get those high-level outcomes agreed or defined in some way that isn't going to change when governments change. So hence, improving biodiversity is quite general, reducing waste is quite general, but they're unlikely to, those objectives or outcomes are unlikely to change depending on who the government is. Each government will do it differently, which is why you'll see the spending
Move around, yeah.
a bit. We've been able to do it because we're in the Parliamentary Commissioner, so we've been able to set those. If you're trying to do it in other areas, you need some mechanism to agree what those broad outcomes are.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to reinvent this wheel here.
Yeah.
I think we've come up with a completely non-contentious, it's not partisan, it's completely non-contentious description of the environmental spend under headings which I think are uncontentious and most New Zealanders understand.
The other side of what you're asking, though, is outcome evaluation, and broadly speaking there, you know, and what the Commissioner's consistently pushed for over time is, if you look at the social investment area, what allows measurement of outcomes there is the integrated data infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which has been invested in since Bill English's times. It's a fantastic resource. That's what we need in the environmental space, that brings together all the environmental information so that you can actually start to measure, the outcomes of activities like Jobs for Nature.
Sorry, what's the term you just used?
Yeah, just one last.
The integrated data infrastructure, the IDI.
The IDI,
Yes.
this is absolute skeleton of the whole social fiscal interface.
Just a last follow-up on that then. I mean, I think that's key in terms of this being sort of non-contentious, as you've said, and getting that agreement across the political spectrum, because how large an exercise would this be? I mean, it's definitely not a one-term thing, but how, given that you've done some work
Well,
on it?
we've done it. Look, it takes about what? Takes about 0.4 of an FTE a year for us. But we haven't got the level of sophistication and granularity you would have if you had this all centralized. But I mean, you can either decide to make it very expensive and very, very complicated, or you could decide to do something which is good enough. I mean, coming down to micro, $10,000 level accuracy on all this is meaningless. The level of granularity matches the scale of the objective. So
I meant changing the system, as you were talking about, from the back end. But yeah,
That's doable. I mean,
Yeah.
we've assessed the feasibility and it's doable. What it really requires is, the crucial thing is what Matt said, is actually having
Yeah.
a coding system that
Yeah.
lasts across administrations,
Yeah.
which requires, some agreed outcomes.
and look, you've got the agreed outcomes here. So actually making this an automatic part of the budget process wouldn't be difficult in my view.
And Lan, you've got a
I've just
supplementary
got
on this.
a quick clarification question. When you say that there have been improvements since the 22-23, are you just saying that's simply because you have been asking those questions and you're going back year after year?
Yes.
That's where the improvements have come from, rather than
Peter, you're the
anything
expert.
else?
Yes, so what we've done is we've extended the coverage of agencies. So we've included agencies like MFAT, Kaingora, and also had a more granular disaggregation of those Crown agents, ECA, EPA. So it's about getting more accurate, more granular data about their functions in the environmental space.
Okay, thank you. And then can I ask you?
Yeah, I'll just move to, because we've got a couple of other questions as well, and then I'll come back to you, Lan. So Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Simon, my question sort of following on from that is, I guess, can you, and appreciate what you're saying about, the trying to sort of pull together the ad hoc expenditure, but the data, then the data is not apples and apples, it's apples and oranges. Given the wider work stream across government, given the RMA reform and your role in that, and also the public performance and accountability, which is being run through FEC, but is designed to better be transparent in terms of outcomes, outputs, clarity. Do you think there's an opportunity for you to come up with a unit or a framework that might help government be more cohesive and coalesce all these things that we're talking in one language?
Well, I mean, you'd be aware we've briefed finance expenditure on this. We think for our area, it adds a very significant improvement. I mean, there's only so much I can do from outside, Ryan. I mean, we've put this in front of ministers, we've put this in front of your colleagues in finance expenditure. You're on it, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've heard me in that context. It's really, I'm not sure. Got any ideas as to how we can push this further?
I think what we said in the briefing to FEC is that the answer in different areas won't be exactly the same.
no.
There will be differences, but the basic framework we think is transferable across different areas of government. Yeah.
There's areas of government where you wouldn't want to do this and you don't need to. I mean, I really, would you spend time on defence on this? I mean, it's all within a vote. You can do it within the vote. It's these cross-cutting things, and there's a few of them.
Yeah, and thanks, Chair, for just letting me test this out. I guess with the potential consolidation of regional councils and your allusion to the fact that there's already spending within regional councils that's probably not captured in our environmental expenditure. Do you think there's an opportunity to better frame up through the RMA or through a legislative tool or something that better tries to capture that, so that we have a snowball in hell's chance of
Well, it all depends on the institutional framework they create. I mean, if we ended up with having, 30 or 40 unitary councils, then I'd say this becomes impossible. If you got rid of regions altogether and had only TLAs, I think you're in an even worse position. But I mean, on the environmental area, because it's just fragmenting something which is not easily fragmentable. But if we stay with something like the sort of current regional level of aggregation, I think if once we're through the form, you don't want to get in people's way, but once that's done, I think it would be possible to talk to whoever's delivering those services at that level to say, right, look, we'd like to be able to track this in a consistent way. I think it would be entirely possible, but until we can see the institutional arrangements, I mean, we haven't got anyone to talk to apart from anything else.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to Lan.
Thank you. Just a question about, I guess, the total, and I get that you're saying that this isn't about the actual expenditure, but you did identify this massive gap or drop, however you want to call it, between 24-25 and 25-26 of $1 billion. Do you think there would be worth if there was, say, for example, a cross-party agreement about the objectives that we're trying to achieve, that there was some form of aim of benchmarking so that there isn't so much swing? Because, you even mentioned yourself how so much of the swing is actually little bits, like projects across the country doing different things. And they are the ones that are actually experiencing the cuts.
Well, hang on, the biggest change is actually not little things. It's under that line, New Zealand is effectively adapting to the impacts of climate change. That's response to events. That's the biggest single change. So let's be clear about that this drop reflects, a large chunk of that drop reflects that. No, but then there are a lot of other things. Look, I mean, sorry, you're asking me if we could get, what did you say?
So basically, like that as part of the cross-party agreement, there could be like a benchmark of like 2% of expenditure or 2%.
No, I don't. Look, at the end of the day, we elect governments and they've got priorities. If you could do it, that would all be nice, but I think it's unlikely. What we can do though, and we've done it, and none of you have objected. I haven't had a single person come to me and say, oh no, this is highly contentious. We've actually given you a classification so that regardless of who the government is, you can identify where expenditure fits under those headings. And I think that's as much as you can ask an officer of Parliament to do. It's for you as elected people to decide on your priorities and what you do where.
Okay, we'll just move on the question 9 to David McLeod.
Thank you, and thank you once again for your persistence in developing this on an annual basis. And although many of us have been here for a short time, it seems to be a repeated conversation that we have, which is said, and I've never seen anybody yet at our level who disagrees with this actually being of some value. So there's no question about that. But I think the conversation today is there's two fronts to it. One is the advocacy of how we can make sure that this persists, gets better and expands into other areas of interest across government. But more importantly, back to one of your original comments, is that we can have a bit of a scattergun approach here and be weak in our holding executive to account, etc. by doing that, or we can prioritise. And your thoughts are priority, which I agree upon considerably. Now, over your time, you've produced a number of reports, and you must have run a process of which report do we write? What's our interest here? What is our priority? So what thoughts or what comments can you provide us to assist us in how we actually prioritise across the many?
It's a really good question. And look, some of you may have heard me say this before, but everything, we've got tiny resources, a fraction of any of the ministries we're dealing with. So we have to prioritise. I can't see any point in going after things which basically seem to be going along okay. No one's complaining about them and they seem to enjoy good support and they're delivering stuff. So there's big hunks of public expenditure where no one's going to say, oh, well, that could be done away with tomorrow. I mean, so there are then problems where things clearly aren't going well and they really are stuck. I mean, and you see it with Parliament over parliaments that the problem never seems to go away. You take water quality in the environmental area. That is one. That is just an ongoing issue. So that's the sort of area where I think it's worth taking a deep dive. And at the other end of the spectrum, and I've done a few of these, what's an area which is right off the radar screen that really no one's talking about, but maybe they should be because there's a sleeper, you know? And so we've gone and done a number of reviews on things which really were not on the front pages and were not front of mind, but we were aware that in many cases, there are good New Zealanders struggling away with a problem which really needs to shed some light on. Now, look, you've got your own networks. You know what's happening out in New Zealand as well as anyone. And there must be times when people say to you, look, do you even know about this? It seems to have no profile. Nobody cares. Okay, well, if enough of you agree on that, and it's in the environmental area, say, well, hang on, let's just dig into here and see, because you'll find in many cases, you'll have a bit of DOC, a bit of LINS, a bit of MPI, a bit of MFE. You'll have all sorts of things with fingers in different dikes, but it may not actually add up. So even if you didn't spend more, you might be able to spend the same amount more effectively. And in some cases, you might then say, look, hang on, this is a bigger priority than some of the things we're spending more on. So I select my topics. And some of them are reviews. I'm doing a review of marine biosecurity. I don't know how much of a priority you think that is, but I thought actually it doesn't get a lot of press. Let's just have a look and see how well we do it, whether we're doing it as well as we can. I will, much more contentious, I'll be giving you something towards the middle of the year on the Environment Emissions Trading Scheme, which will pull together all the work I've done there. Now, we have an emissions trading scheme, and we keep saying it's very, very important, but is it actually doing the job it was designed to do? I'm sure you can find plenty in here that you could drill down into. I'm happy to help too. That's the other thing. If you want to come to us and say, look, we've been thinking about a number of topics, what would your view be? We do have some, insight into this, so we could probably help.
Thank you. Look, we have got a few more questions and we are nearly at time, so we will move to Rachel Brooking.
More a comment and then a question, short comment, and that is, I can tell you that I like your outcomes. I think they are not contentious, as you say, except the climate change one would be very useful if that was split into the mitigation and adaptation. And I think I know the reason why it's not in there. It's because this is how a lot of government departments code it. But particularly given the adaptation piece is so reactive in it, as you identified in your opening.
Yeah.
It's the piece that moves around a whole lot. So that's one point. And my second one is just if you can clarify that this mechanism for tagging departmental expenditure, I think I heard Jeff say that would be easy, but you say that you need the help of the Minister of Finance. So given that the outcomes seem to be agreed on, is it just a direction from the Minister of Finance that is needed, or is it something more complicated?
Well, it's a little bit more complicated than to say, go and do it and pick up what the PC's done. Someone would have to look at the way we've done this and come up with a coding methodology, which was robust. And then you've got to explain, as we've had to do with each government department, look, this is what we're trying to achieve. And look, if you've been reading these over the years, you'll know. I mean, the stuff we can't, the stuff that we can't easily attribute, it's all mixed up. And so you have to be honest about what you can't do. And so is it going to be, as an item of expenditure, going to be principally that contributing to that outcome? So what's principally mean? What's the fraction, and so on and so forth? So you need to work that through. It's got to be workable. You can't have public servants going down to sort of micro level. It's silly. So it's I think there is real implementation work to be done. It's not easy, but I think we've proved with the goodwill actually of a lot of very helpful public servants, you can do this. So I don't think it would be a, oh my God, moment for the public service if we decided to make this more
generalised. But you were saying a 0.4 a full-time equivalent has done this work from you. So it should be something that Treasury has the capacity to put some.
Look, I'm sure Treasury has capacity. I think the real issue is for government departments. I think that's where the real work is done, because you can say to them, okay, look, here's the specification, this is how you do it, well, you go away and do it. Wow, as we've discovered, you then have to go and talk to a lot of people. You've got to understand it's got to have a different understanding of how you are expending public money. You've got to, so it's two lenses. Do you want to add anything?
I think it's just different agencies have different charts of accounts, so it's really tailoring the process to the specific agency to get that detail that you want. But it doesn't have to be gold standard in terms of accounting.
Yeah, that's right.
Just a quick sup on that, because obviously what is classified as environmental spending may change and be a little bit more diverse across agencies. Do you find that or not? Because, there's all sorts of things that you could potentially attribute to environmental spending.
Yeah, so we use a standard definition, international definition for this, and there is a lot of variability across agencies, but the definition is so broad that it encompasses every sort of material environmental expenditure that agencies incur. So we don't find so many issues around that. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Quick question from Grant McCullum.
I was just going to say to Rachel's point on the climate change fund, we are looking to actually separate that out.
Yeah.
That's why we've done it on page 8 this year as
If
well.
you have a look at page 8.
We just need to work out how to make that into the annual series so it doesn't muck up past ones.
Just a quick question around the working in the regional councils. Did you see sort of obvious overlap and lack of coordination between regional councils doing and what government departments are up to?
No, well, I'll speak for myself here, and this is not based on this exercise, but no, I mean, there is as much overlap and duplication between government departments, frankly, at the level of regions than there is the regions. I mean, regional councils often find they've got MPI burrowing away here and there were MFE over there. I think before the Crown, targets regional councils too much, I think they do a pretty good job of not much resource. The Crown needs to sort out its view of how it's going to help them and intervene.
So there's more opportunity to actually work together more effectively.
Oh, no
That's
question.
your underlying message?
No question about that, yeah.
Okay, we'll just take one last question from Julianne.
Thank you so much. Love your work. This is maybe a little overly ambitious, but would it be useful if we had these categories and we have the outcomes we want to also look at government spending that is actively contributing to worse outcomes? Because here we've got NZTA spending 40 million on climate action, and arguably they're spending several billion on things that are going to increase emissions. I mean, where
That's what accounting is.
yeah, I mean, it's just if we're only looking at what government's doing to try and get these better outcomes, do we also need to look at government spending that might be actively undermining?
Yeah, but you do that in other places, in other ways. I mean, you looking at transport expenditure.
Yeah.
So, you can dig into that. But I mean, we're not going to start reporting on negative outcomes. I mean, governments say, this is the fundamental premise in a democracy, is that, people, we do things collectively, we use government because we want to achieve certain outcomes. No one is wanting to achieve an outcome of worse climate or worse biodiversity or worse biosecurity. So I think we need to part that idea. The question is, well, okay, is the money you're spending to advance these climate outcomes, is that actually achieving its end? And it's always open to people to say, and at the same time, you're spending, I did this at the OECD all the time, looking at environmental subsidies which were damaging the environment. So you're spending all of this money here. What about that spend there? This process enables you to do that.
Thank you. Look, we have met time. We appreciate all your insights on this topic, which obviously reoccurs, and we appreciate all your work on it.
May I just ask you one question?
Yes.
We really put a lot of work into getting this prior to scrutiny week for you. And I want to continue to do that. Should we continue to do that? Is this useful for you?
Oh, I think it's very useful, and we certainly appreciate the work and you getting it to us before scrutiny week so that we can, ask more directed questions around the environmental spending.
Just wanted to check that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right,
Thank you very
thank
much
you.
for
We'll see you
your
later in
time
the morning.
today. Yes.